Welcome to the Scary Collector. I'm glad you found this channel. Though I have to warn you, what you're about to hear tonight isn't fiction. Every story in this video is rooted in real events. Real people. Real moments when an ordinary day turned into something no one could have ever prepared for. Tonight, we have 6 stories. 6 encounters with individuals who had already taken human lives, or would go on to do so. 6 moments where survival hung on a thread thinner than you can imagine. So dim the lights, turn up the volume, and stay with me until the very end, because trust me, each story is darker than the last. Story 1. The Hitchhiker's Passenger. Inspired by the crimes of John Edward Robinson, the first internet serial killer. The year was 1994. The stretch of highway between Olathe and Kansas City, Kansas, was dark, long, and mostly empty on that October night. Amanda, not her real name, changed to protect her identity, had been driving for 3 hours straight, coming back from visiting her sister. Her gas gauge was sitting right at a quarter tank and the rain had gone from a drizzle to a curtain of gray water slamming against the windshield. She almost didn't stop. She told herself she wouldn't stop. Her mother had always warned her about stopping for strangers, especially on empty highways, especially at night. But the man standing at the edge of the road, just past the mile marker 47 exit, was holding a cardboard sign that read, "Broke down, please help." He was wearing a suit, a tie. He had a briefcase. He looked like someone's father, Amanda would later say in an interview. He looked like he'd just come from a business meeting and his car had simply given up on him. He looked safe. That word, safe, would haunt her for years. She pulled over. The man's name, he told her, was Richard. He was 50-something, soft-spoken, with a salt and pepper haircut and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He smelled faintly of cologne and something else, something she couldn't quite place, something almost chemical beneath the pleasantness. "I can't thank you enough," he said, settling into the passenger seat with the practiced ease of a man completely at home in a stranger's car. "My phone died. I've been standing out there for 40 minutes. Amanda merged back onto the highway. She told him she was heading to Kansas City, that she could drop him at the next town. He said that was perfect. He said he had family there. They made small talk. He was charming. He asked about her job, her family. He was the kind of man who listened, who nodded slowly and responded with thoughtful follow-up questions. Within 10 minutes, Amanda felt completely at ease. That was his talent. 15 miles down the road, something shifted. Amanda isn't sure what it was. She describes it as a pressure change in the car, like something invisible entered the vehicle along with a new silence. Richard had stopped talking mid-sentence. He was looking out the passenger window. His right hand, she noticed, had moved to rest on his knee, fingers spread wide, knuckles pale. "Can I ask you something?" he said, and his voice had changed. Still calm, but the warmth had drained out of it like water through a crack. "Sure," she said. "Do you live alone?" Amanda's heart did something she had never experienced before. It didn't speed up. It seemed to stop entirely and then reboot, slamming back to life with a force she felt in her throat. She said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "My husband's waiting for me." She didn't have a husband. Richard said. "Just that. He turned back to the window. She gripped the steering wheel. She started calculating distances in her head. The next exit was 3 miles. The next gas station after that was maybe 2 more. She remembered her phone was in the center console. She remembered she had one hand free. She started looking for reasons to pull over. "Actually," she said, keeping her voice level, "I think I need to stop for gas. I'm closer to empty than I thought." "You have a quarter tank," he said, without looking at her, without looking at the gauge. How did he know that? She had checked the gauge when he first got in. He had been watching her eyes. I burned through it fast, she said. Old car. He turned then. Looked at her. The reading glasses had come down to his nose at some point without her noticing, and over the top of them his eyes were still and dark and entirely unreadable. You're nervous, he said. I'm tired, she said. You should let me drive for a while. I'm okay. I insist. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move. But the word insist landed in the car like something heavy dropped on a table. Amanda felt her entire body go cold. She made a decision. She didn't slow down for the exit. She sped up. She pushed the car to 80, 85, her eyes locked on the road, watching in her peripheral vision as Richard's hand came off his knee and moved toward his briefcase on the floor. What are you doing? He said, and there it was, the first crack in the mask. Not anger. Not panic. Something worse. Annoyance. The cold irritation of a man whose plan was not going the way he'd arranged it. I forgot. I'm meeting my husband at the rest stop ahead, she said. He texted me a minute ago. Driving there now. She grabbed her phone from the console, unlocked it with her thumb, and called the last number in her recent list. Her sister, who she'd visited 3 hours ago. The phone rang twice. Her sister picked up. Hey! Amanda said, voice deliberately loud. Hey, honey. Yeah, I'm about 10 minutes away. Is Dave with you? Okay. Tell him to meet me outside. Okay? Okay. Love you. She hung up. Richard said nothing. She took the exit. She pulled into a BP station blazing with fluorescent lights, a semi-truck idling nearby, a couple filling their tank on the far side. She pulled directly under the brightest light and stopped the car. Thank you for the ride, Richard said. His voice had returned to normal, warm, polite, the businessman caught in the rain again, just like that. He picked up his briefcase, opened the door, stepped out. He straightened his tie. He leaned down and looked at her through the open door. You're a smart girl, he said. And he walked away into the dark beyond the gas station lights. Amanda locked her doors. She sat there for 20 minutes, shaking, before she could drive again. She didn't report the encounter. She told herself she was overreacting, that nothing had actually happened, that she was being paranoid. For months later, she turned on the news and saw a face she recognized. Richard, or rather, the man she would later identify as someone operating in that same corridor during that same period, fit the profile of a man police were building a case against. A man known to be soft-spoken and charming. A man who had lured women with careful words and patient manipulation. A man who wore suits and carried briefcases and seemed, to everyone who met him, completely safe. She called the tip line that same night. She was never able to confirm whether the man in her car was the same man. But she has never stopped believing it. And she has never, in 30 years, stopped for a stranger on a highway again. The case of John Edward Robinson, known as the first serial killer to use the internet to lure victims, remains one of the most chilling examples of how predators construct carefully calibrated masks. Robinson was eventually convicted in 2002 for multiple murders spanning nearly 2 decades. Investigators believe his victim count may be higher than the official record. His method was always the same: patience, charm, and the deliberate construction of trust. Amanda's story is one of thousands of near-miss accounts that never make it into the official case files. Moments where someone's instincts fired just in time, where a small decision made the difference between driving home and never being found. She was lucky. She listened to the cold in her chest before it was too late. Story 2. The Night Shift. Inspired by the crimes of the BTK killer, Dennis Rader, Wichita, Kansas. There is a particular kind of silence that exists inside a building after midnight when almost everyone has gone home. It's not peaceful, it's watchful. It's the silence of empty hallways and locked stairwells and security cameras blinking their slow red pulses in the dark. Karen worked the night shift at a mid-sized insurance firm in Wichita, Kansas, in the winter of 1985. She was 26 years old, working late to meet a filing deadline, alone on the 4th floor of a 6-story building. She had done it dozens of times before. The building had security. The parking garage had lights. The elevator required a keycard after 9 p.m. She had done everything right. She was at her desk, surrounded by manila folders and the bluish glow of her computer monitor, when she heard the elevator chime. She looked up. It was 1:17 a.m. The elevator doors opened at the end of the hall. She waited for footsteps. Heard none. The doors slid closed again. She went back to work. At 1:34 a.m., she heard the stairwell door open. This was different. The stairwell was at the opposite end of the building from the elevator. It required a keycard too, but that keycard worked for all company employees, including, she reminded herself, the cleaning crew who sometimes came through at odd hours. She listened. She heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, not the brisk efficient movement of someone who knew where they were going. These footsteps paused, then moved, then paused again. Karen lowered herself slightly in her chair without knowing she was doing it. Some part of her brain had already started calculating before the conscious part caught up. The footsteps reached the hallway junction 15 feet from her desk and stopped. Nothing. She sat perfectly still for what felt like a very long time. Then a voice said, "Working late." She startled hard enough to knock her coffee off the desk. She spun around. A man was standing at the edge of her office doorway. He was wearing work clothes, dark pants, a collared shirt with a name tag she couldn't read from that distance. He was holding a clipboard. He was smiling. He looked, she later said, like someone who belonged there. Maintenance. Maybe. Building management. Normal. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to scare you. Just doing a check of the floors." Karen's heart was hammering. She forced herself to smile back. "No, I'm sorry. I was in my own world." "Happens," he said. He didn't move from the doorway. "I'll let you get back to it," he said, and he still didn't move. She noticed then that his clipboard had nothing on it. Not a single sheet of paper. Just a bare metal board with the clip at the top, swinging slightly from his hand. She noticed his shoes. Brown loafers, slightly worn. Not work boots. Not the rubber-soled shoes the building's maintenance team wore. She had seen their shoes during the day. She'd made the mental note the way you make small unconscious notes about things in your environment. These were wrong. "Is there something I can help you with?" she asked, and she heard herself using the polite, professional voice she used with difficult clients. The voice that sounded calm even when everything underneath it was not. "Just checking who's up here," he said. "Building manager wants a log." "Of course," she said. "It's just me up here tonight." She was telling him she was alone. She realized it the moment the words left her mouth. "Thought so," he said, and smiled again. Karen had a phone on her desk. She had a purse beside her chair with her car keys inside it. She had memorized, without deliberately doing so, that the distance from her desk to the stairwell was approximately 40 feet, and the stairwell went down while the elevator was at the opposite end of the floor. She also had, on the corner of her desk, a heavy 3-hole punch. Black, solid, about 2 pounds of metal and plastic. She picked it up casually, as if she was moving it to reach something behind it. "Well," she said, "I appreciate you checking in. I'm going to be at it for another hour or so if that affects your log." She looked at him directly when she said it. She kept the 3-hole punch in her right hand. Something happened in that moment that she has described in every retelling of this story. The man's smile didn't change, but something behind it did. Something behind his eyes shifted the way a shadow shifts when the light source moves. He looked at the 3-hole punch. He looked at her face. He looked back at the empty hallway behind him. "I'll leave you to it then," he said. He turned. He walked back toward the stairwell. She listened to his footsteps the whole way. She listened to the stairwell door open and close. She counted to 10. Then she picked up the phone and called the building's security desk in the lobby. "This is Karen on 4, she said. "Can you tell me if there's a maintenance crew working tonight?" A pause. Then, "No'm. Building's just got you and us down here." She was in the elevator with her coat and her purse inside of 90 seconds. She did not wait for the security guard she asked to meet her. She went straight to the parking garage, straight to her car, locked the doors before she even started the engine, and drove. She filed a report the next morning. The building's security footage from that night showed the elevator door opening on the 4th floor, but no one had badged in. The keycard log for the stairwell showed a card had been swiped. A card registered to a former employee whose access should have been revoked 6 months prior. It never was. The man was never identified. In the mid-1980s, the BTK killer, Dennis Rader, was in what investigators now call his dormant period. Though dormant did not mean inactive. It meant careful. It meant patient. It meant he was moving through the world looking for opportunities, testing boundaries, watching how people responded to his presence. Rader worked, during parts of his life, in roles that gave him legitimate-looking reasons to be in places he shouldn't be. He carried clipboards. He wore work clothes. He knocked on doors in the middle of the day and at night, and people let him in because he looked like he belonged there. Karen's encounter was never definitively connected to Rader, but it fits a pattern investigators have documented dozens of times. A man who was extraordinarily skilled at appearing ordinary, at manufacturing reasons to be present, at testing the edges of someone's willingness to challenge him. She trusted her eyes. She trusted the wrong shoes and the empty clipboard and the feeling in her chest that said, "This isn't right." She carried a 3-hole punch. And she went home. Story 3. The Friendly Neighbor. Inspired by the crimes of John Wayne Gacy, Chicago, Illinois. In the summer of 1976, a teenager named Michael, 17 years old, working odd jobs in the Norwood Park neighborhood of Chicago, was hired to do yard work by a man who lived 3 streets over. The man was well known in the neighborhood. He threw big parties. He did charity work. He dressed as a clown for children's events at the local hospital. Everyone knew him. Everyone liked him. His name, for the purposes of this story, is not important yet. Michael had met him at a neighborhood block party the summer before. The man, heavyset, enthusiastic, always with a wide grin and a firm handshake, had made the rounds, calling everyone by name, bringing extra folding chairs when there weren't enough, making sure the older residents got food first. Michael's mother had said, watching him, "Now that's a good neighbor." So when the man knocked on Michael's door and asked if he wanted to earn $20 trimming the hedges and mowing the back lawn, Michael said yes without hesitation. He went over on a Saturday morning. The house was larger than it appeared from the street, a sprawling ranch-style home with an addition on the back. The man greeted him at the door in a polo shirt, cheerful as always, pressed a cold Coke into his hands before Michael even asked for one. "I'll be inside if you need me," he said. "Garage is open. Tools are on the left wall. Take your time." Michael worked for about an hour and a half. The sun was getting high and hot, and he was almost done with the back section when the man appeared at the back door and waved him in. "Come cool down for a minute," he called. "I made sandwiches." Michael came inside. The kitchen was nice. Clean. There were police commendations on the wall. He was, Michael would later learn, an auxiliary police officer. There were photos of him with local politicians. With the Democratic Party chairman. With the mayor. They sat at the kitchen table and ate. The man asked Michael about school, about his plans, about whether he'd thought about going into business. He ran a construction company. He said, always looking for good young men who weren't afraid of hard work. Then he said, "You want to see something cool? Come on, I'll show you the basement. I've got a pool table down there." Michael stood up. He doesn't know what stopped him. He has spent decades trying to name it. It wasn't anything the man said or did. He was just as friendly as ever, just as warm, just as normal. But standing in that kitchen, about to take that first step toward the basement door, Michael felt something that he described as a wall I couldn't see. "Actually," Michael said, "I should finish up outside. I want to get the edging done before it gets too hot." The man looked at him for a moment. Just a moment. Then he smiled. "Sure," he said. "Sure, of course." Michael went back outside. He finished the edging. He collected his $20. He thanked the man and walked home. He didn't think about it much. He didn't have a reason to. He had turned down an invitation to see a pool table. That was all. 3 years later, in December of 1978, Michael's mother called him into the living room. There was a photo on the news. An arrest had been made. 33 young men had been found buried beneath the house and in the crawl space. Michael stared at the television screen for a very long time. He recognized the face. John Wayne Gacy was convicted of the murders of 33 young men and boys between 1972 and 1978, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. He worked in construction, was active in local Democratic politics, and performed as Pogo the Clown at charity events. He was so embedded in his community that neighbors, politicians, and law enforcement all vouched for his character. Gacy's standard method was to invite young men, many of them job seekers or neighborhood teenagers, into his home. The basement was part of the pattern. Michael's account is one of several documented near-miss testimonials from individuals in the Norwood Park area who interacted with Gacy and, for reasons they often cannot fully explain, declined an invitation that may have saved their lives. The unnamed wall. The invisible moment of resistance. Whatever it was, it worked. Story 4. The Broken Down Car. Inspired by the crimes of Ted Bundy, Pacific Northwest, 1974. She has told this story only twice in her life, once to a detective in 1975, and once to her daughter, the night before her daughter left for college. She asked that her name never be used, and so we will call her by the name she chose when she finally spoke, Claire. Claire was 20 years old in the autumn of 1974. She was a junior at the University of Washington in Seattle, studying literature, living in a small apartment 3 blocks from campus with 2 other girls who were both away for the weekend. She had gone to the library to return books and pick up a reserve hold. It was a gray Saturday afternoon in October, the kind of afternoon that Seattle does better than anywhere else. Soft, damp, the light the color of old silver. She was wearing a long coat and carrying her bag over her shoulder, and she was thinking about nothing in particular when she turned the corner toward the parking lot where she'd left her car. A man was standing beside a light blue Volkswagen Beetle. The hood was up. He had a cast on his left arm. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. "Excuse me," he said. His voice was pleasant, educated, calm. "I'm so sorry to bother you. I can't get this thing started and I'm completely useless with cars." He gestured at his cast and smiled in a self-deprecating way that seemed practiced but not unnatural. He had good teeth. He was handsome in an uncomplicated, collegiate way. I just need someone to sit in the driver's seat and try the ignition while I check the connection, he said. It'll take 30 seconds. Claire almost said yes. She would spend a long time trying to understand why she didn't. There was nothing overtly wrong. His request was simple and mechanical and completely logical. He was well-dressed, well-spoken. He looked like someone who attended the same classes she did. But he was standing very close to the open passenger door of his car. Not the driver's side. The passenger side. Why would he need her to sit in the driver's seat if the door he had open was the passenger door? She didn't consciously reason through it in that moment. She just noticed it. The way you notice a word that's spelled wrong before you can name what's wrong with it. I'm so sorry, she said, and she kept moving. I don't know anything about cars either. He called after her, still pleasant, of course, no problem, sorry to bother you. She got to her own car. She got in and locked the door. She sat there for a moment and looked back across the parking lot. The man with the cast had turned and was watching her. When he saw her looking, he smiled and gave a small wave. She drove away. She drove directly home and stayed there for the rest of the evening. In the months that followed, women began to disappear from the University of Washington area. From Lake Sammamish State Park, 30 miles away, 2 women disappeared on the same afternoon in July of that same year. Witnesses at the park described a good-looking young man with his arm in a sling, approaching women alone, asking for help with his sailboat. His name, they would eventually learn, was Ted. Ted Bundy murdered at least 30 women across multiple states between 1974 and 1978, though investigators believe the true number may be significantly higher. His method relied on appearing unthreatening, using props, injuries, and charm to lower his target's defenses. The cast on his arm appears in numerous survivor accounts. The light blue Volkswagen Beetle appears in dozens more. Claire's account, given to investigators in 1975, was one of several that helped build the early psychological profile of the suspect then known only as Ted. She noticed the wrong door. That was all. One small wrong detail in an otherwise perfectly constructed performance. It was enough. Story 5. The Good Samaritan. Inspired by the crimes of Israel Keys, Alaska and the Pacific Northwest. James was 34 years old when he encountered the man he now refers to simply as the stranger in the green jacket. He was on a solo hiking trip in rural Vermont in the fall of 2010, 3 days into a 5-day route that took him through some of the most isolated terrain in the northeastern United States. He had planned meticulously. He had maps, backup maps, a satellite communicator, a water filter, a bear canister, enough food for 7 days. He was experienced. He had done this kind of trip a dozen times. He had not planned for his ankle. On the morning of the 3rd day, stepping over a root crossing a stream, his left ankle turned. He felt the pop before he felt the pain. A clean, definitive sound that he knew immediately was bad. He sat down on the stream bank and assessed. Swollen within minutes, painful to bear weight, but not broken. A significant sprain. He could walk, but slowly. He was 12 miles from the nearest trailhead. He started moving. He had no choice. By mid-afternoon he had covered 4 of those 12 miles. He was resting against a tree, eating trail mix and trying to decide whether to make camp or push on, when he heard footsteps on the trail. The man who came around the bend was wearing a green jacket and carrying a pack that looked like military surplus. He was tall, well over 6 feet, and moved with an economy of motion that James, an athlete himself, immediately recognized as someone extremely fit and deliberately quiet in their movement. "Hey," the man said. "Just that." James explained his situation, the ankle, the distance, the plan to push through. The man in the green jacket stood listening with his arms loosely at his sides, making no move to help or to leave, just listening with an attentiveness that was somehow more intense than the situation required. "I can help you out," he said when James finished. "I know this area. There's a forest road about 2 miles east of here. Fire road gets you to a state route. Shorter than going back the way you came." James looked at his map. The fire road was on it, barely, a thin dotted line, and the man was right. It would cut his exit distance roughly in half. "I'd appreciate the company," James said. The man in the green jacket looked at him for a moment before answering. "I'll take you as far as the road," he said. They walked. The man was helpful in practical ways. He adjusted his pace to match James's laboured gait without being asked, pointed out obstacles before James reached them, offered him ibuprofen from his pack at the right moment. He was, objectively, an excellent trail companion. He spoke very little. When James tried conversation, where was he from? How long had he been out here? Did he hike this area often? The answers were brief, technically sufficient, and contained no information. He was from the West Coast. He'd been out a few days. He hiked all over. Nothing. James noticed but didn't find it alarming. Some people were private. Some solo hikers were out there specifically to avoid conversation. He let it go. It was when they stopped to check the map that James noticed something that he didn't know how to interpret. The man's pack was open for a moment. He'd unzipped the top to retrieve a water bottle, and James, glancing over, caught a glimpse of the contents. He saw what appeared to be lengths of rope. Zip ties, the heavy-duty kind. A dark roll of something he couldn't identify. A small case that might have been tools. People carried rope and zip ties and tools. That was completely normal for backcountry travel. But he also saw, half buried beneath a folded jacket, what looked like a length of chain. Hikers did not carry chains. James said nothing. He looked at his map. He kept his breathing normal. The man zipped his pack closed, capped his water bottle, slung the pack back on. "About a half-mile," he said. "Fire road's right there." "Great," James said. He made a decision in that half-mile. He had his satellite communicator in his hip pocket, not a phone, a dedicated two-way device. He activated the tracking function without taking it out, pressing the button through the fabric of his pocket. Anyone monitoring his account would now see his exact GPS position updating in real time. Then, when the fire road appeared ahead, a dusty two-track path cutting through the trees, he stopped. "I can make it from here," he said. "I really appreciate your help." The man in the green jacket stopped too. He looked at the fire road. He looked at James. Something in his face that had been neutral tilted slightly, not enough for James to name what it tilted toward. "You sure?" he said. "Positive," James said. "Seriously, thank you. You saved me a lot of pain." Another pause. Longer than necessary. "All right," the man said. "Take care of that ankle." He turned and walked back the way they had come. James did not wait. He moved as fast as his ankle allowed, down the fire road, until he reached the state route. He sat by the road for an hour and a half until a pickup truck stopped and gave him a ride to the nearest town. He filed no report. He had nothing specific to report. A man had helped him. A man had carried a chain. These were not, individually or together, crimes. It was 3 years later that James saw the coverage of a case out of Alaska. A man had been arrested for the abduction and murder of a young woman. Investigators revealed that he was suspected in multiple murders across multiple states, crimes he had meticulously planned and executed over a period of years. He was former military. He was extraordinarily disciplined, extraordinarily cautious, extraordinarily patient. He was tall. He had moved through wilderness areas across the country. He had a preference for remote locations. His name was Israel Keys. James printed the photo from the news article and looked at it for a long time. He can't say with certainty. He has never been able to say with certainty. But he has carried the memory of that green jacket and that half-open pack and that moment of silence at the fire road's edge for every year since. He still hikes. But he carries a personal alarm now, and he activates his satellite tracker every morning and every evening. And he tells someone exactly where he's going before he ever leaves the trailhead. And he never accepts help from strangers in the wilderness without listening very carefully to the silence underneath their words. Israel Keys confessed to 8 murders before his suicide in 2012. The FBI believes the actual number is higher. He operated in remote areas, buried what investigators called murder caches of supplies in advance, and spent years planning individual crimes to ensure he left no traceable patterns. He was one of the most methodical killers ever investigated by the FBI. James was lucky. He noticed a chain. Story 6. The Locksmith. Inspired by the crimes of Richard Chase, the Vampire of Sacramento, 1977 to 1978. This is the story Sarah has never spoken about publicly. We have her permission to share it, with identifying details altered. She has only one condition: that we tell it exactly as it happened. No dramatization. No embellishment. The truth, she said, is scary enough. It was a weekday morning in Sacramento, California, in early January of 1978. Sarah was 22 years old, home alone. Her roommate worked early shifts, when there was a knock at her apartment door. She looked through the peephole. A man she didn't recognize was standing in the hallway. He was thin, very thin, she noted, the way someone is thin when something is wrong with them physically. He was wearing a rumpled jacket and carrying what appeared to be a small toolbox. "Locksmith," he called through the door. "Building manager sent me. There's a problem with the locks on this floor." Sarah hesitated. She hadn't been notified of any locksmith visit. But the building did occasionally do maintenance without much warning, and the man had a toolbox, and he'd mentioned the building manager. "Just a second," she called back. She went to find her phone. She called the building manager's number. The line rang 4 times and went to answering machine. She stood in her kitchen for a moment, phone in hand. The man knocked again. This'll only take a few minutes." She went back to the door, looked through the peephole again. He was still there, shifting his weight slightly from foot to foot, looking down at his toolbox. "Can you come back?" she called through the door. "I need to verify with the building manager." A pause. "I'm just doing the floor," he said. His voice had shifted, slightly, barely perceptibly, but it had gone from the neutral professional tone to something that sounded, she would later say, like a question had occurred to him. "This is the last apartment." She didn't say anything. "I'll need to call the manager first," she said. "Please come back." Another pause. Longer. Then she heard his footsteps moving down the hallway. She went to the window that looked out onto the building's side entrance and watched until she saw him emerge from the building's door below. Thin, carrying his toolbox, moving quickly, not looking back. She tried the building manager again. This time he picked up on the second ring. She described the man. She described what he'd said. There was a silence on the line. "I didn't send a locksmith," the building manager said. "I didn't schedule anything for this morning." Sarah called the police. They came, took a report, asked for a description. She gave it as precisely as she could. Thin, very thin, pale, dark jacket, small toolbox, maybe late 20s. They nodded. They wrote it down. They were polite and did not seem alarmed. 8 days later, the murders began. A woman 3 miles away. Then another family. Then more. The city went into a particular kind of terror. The kind that settles over a place and makes it different. Quieter. The kind where people check their locks twice and park in lit areas and don't open their doors to strangers. When the police caught Richard Chase in late January and his photograph was released, Sarah was at a friend's house. She saw the television. She left the room and stood in the hallway alone for a few minutes. Then she came back and told her friend what had happened 3 weeks earlier at her apartment door. Richard Chase killed 6 people in the Sacramento area between December 1977 and January 1978. He was known for entering homes, often through unlocked doors or windows, and choosing victims apparently at random. He had a documented pattern of checking door handles of houses and apartments and moving on if they were locked, interpreting an unlocked door as an invitation. Sarah's locked door had, according to this pattern, already been checked before the knock. The toolbox was never explained. She has lived with this knowledge for nearly 50 years. That the door she didn't open, the call she made instead, the willingness to be inconvenient rather than accommodating. These small, ordinary choices were the whole distance between her life and something else entirely. She wants people to know one thing. You are never rude for not opening your door. You are never paranoid for making a phone call. You are never overreacting when something doesn't feel right. Listen. Always listen. 6 stories. 6 survivors. 6 moments where death passed close enough to breathe on their necks, and moved on. But not everyone is so lucky. If these stories taught us anything, it's this. Evil doesn't always announce itself with a warning. It doesn't always look the way we expect. It smiles. It holds doors open. It asks if you need help. Stay aware. Trust your instincts. And never ignore that quiet voice inside you. The one that whispers, something isn't right. Until next time, this is the Scary Collector. Stay safe out there. And remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones made of flesh and bone.